Mike Lefko and Dave Wyman with you, a man who came on this show early in the offseason and had a pretty good prediction, so we wanted to talk about it with them.
So that I think that the starting quarterback is not on the roster if we're looking at it today. I just see this team being young, and if you look at the history of what Schneider has done with this franchise over his tenure, is he's always looked to get younger, and Geno is a capable quarterback. I think he's still a starting quarterback. He had his best year as a pro this year. I just don't see him on the Seahawks roster the next season simply because they'll be looking to bring someone in to nurture and mature a young mind with newness and freshness and something different at the quarterback position. So,
DK, what's your biggest reason for saying he will not be back?
Well, as you look at his tag this year, I think DK set to make upwards of 30, both he and Lockett, and there's no way you retain both of them. DK, I mean, this was really the first year that we saw, production drop off, and he had, in fact, missed 2 games, and that was rare. But even when they decided to give him, a new contract, they only did it for 3 years. So it tells me that was another test. So let's try him out for another 3 years. Let's see if there's drop off. And again, in, kind of his development or growth as a pro, fell short of, 1,000 yards this season. I don't think that's the big reason. I think a lot of it, too, is about bringing something fresh and something new, a dynamic talent. DK he is a star number 1 receiver. What I don't believe is that they'll bring him back at the number at $35+ million.
Do you have people coming up to you now, asking you to make predictions about things? Because you know everything apparently in advance.
I got a few text messages. I think the best one I've received so far is someone called me the mentalist.
Yeah. I called you, what was the one from the 70s, the Karnak, the Amazing or something like that? And I had to explain who that was to you because it was from like my era. But
you're dating yourself, Dave.
Yes,
you're dating yourself.
I know that.
We got a couple of like Babsterdamus on the text line.
Oh, there you go. Well, Babs, interesting, as far as, and again, just to recap, because I was sitting, I remember on the booth, we were out at the stadium a few years ago, and I think it was after the 2021 season, it might have been 2022, and you said you didn't think that Russell Wilson or Bobby Wagner were going to be on the team. And I agreed with you on Bobby, but no way with Russ, just because, it's so hard to find those guys. And then, and then you said the same thing about DK and Geno. And just tell us, like, what was your reasoning at that time that made you feel like both Geno and DK were going to be gone?
Yeah, you look at the cap for where the Seahawks were coming out of, just a few months ago last season. You had Lockett at $30+ million, DK at $30+ million, and you see the emergence of what JSN is capable of doing. That's just insane. And, so you felt like they were going to get young there. Now, from, a locker room standpoint and personnel, you're bringing in a new young head coach. And, Dave, you and I know, I've had 3 head coaches over my 7-year tenure here in Seattle alone. And new coaches bring about change. Yeah. I think it was the right thing to do to keep Geno at quarterback last season just to, because he was experienced and, had the best grasp in terms of, production for positioning where the Seahawks were. But it was a high suspicion that change was going to come. And just knowing the nature of John Schneider and, my own personal trends of just watching him over the last decade plus, is that the writing felt like it was time. So that was the initial kind of thought and inclination, certainly getting young, saving money. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball. Draymond, you brought in, Draymond Jones, who, you had a 4-sack, $25 million defensive end. Yeah. Where in the league does that, add up? It just doesn't. So, again, more cap room there for them to, make the move. The one thing, though, I will admit, I didn't see I thought Ryan Grubb would get another year, and I didn't see them shifting offensive coordinators right away. So that was kind of a shocker, not really a shocker, but a surprising kind of revelation that I didn't predict. So, Dave, if you were right about Grubb being gone and embracing a new offensive coordinator, then you one-upped me on this one, buddy.
I don't think so, man. I thought that they would give him another year.
Well, Jordan, with this offensive overhaul, as you just mentioned, new offensive coordinator and the staff that comes with it, and bringing in Sam Darnold, what are your expectations for that side of the ball heading into this season?
Here's what I'll say, and I know many people aren't salivating over the sexy pick, but Sam Darnold has positioned himself to, he basically reset his market. So that was awesome for him to have the kind of year that he did last year, taking his team to the playoffs, I think only losing 2 games. And, again, so a lot of people are questioning, what's really happening in the Seahawks front office. I think the expectation for me, and as it is for this staff, is you set the floor at 10 games, right? So, I mean, anything less than that and a berth to the playoffs, to me, it wouldn't be a failure, but it would be a step back. And maybe in some cases you do have to take a step back to go forward, but I don't think that's the case with this team. And I don't think that's the mentality. I certainly don't get that vibe from Coach McDonald, and, knowing, John Schneider's personality, I think that would be pretty much of an insult to say that, we're going to take a step back and we're going to, tank the season kind of, sort of thing. I think the expectation is a playoff berth, but the floor is definitely 10 games. So I think the next few days and even weeks leading up to the draft will be pivotal to see what other pieces they put around Sam Darnold, because right now you got JSN Bobo. You know what I mean? That's your targets. Right. So I sense, this is my sense, is that they're going to bring in a veteran receiver, someone that they can get for a bargain. And I say bargain, less than $5 million, right? Who can command a presence, much like we've seen over the times and over the years when, Brandon Marshall late in his career, or we've seen DeAndre Hopkins go to the Chiefs, late in his career, right? Someone who, understands the game, who can, help, guide some of the young players. They're going to get younger, that's for sure. But someone who can still command a presence and be a big target, for Sam Darnold in the passing game. That's what I sense, at least from the receivers room.
Hey, Babs, I'll have you talk about both these guys because you did mention Jake Bobo. But start off first, you were a defensive back. What is it that makes JSN so good?
Matchups. I think where he's winning is matchups. We've watched JSN emerge into understanding football now. His rookie year, we saw him make some spectacular catches and some plays down the field. DK was still the primary target, but you started to see the shift of playing time and positioning in terms of how they're getting him the football versus what used to be, I would say, the Tyler Lockett playbook. JSN started assuming those roles. And I think what we saw from year 1 to year 2 in terms of his production, and certainly, trip to the Pro Bowl this season for him in year 2, is that he understands the defense a lot better. Usually that rookie, you're kind of just operating on pure talent and, learning the curve and the language and, understanding how to get open while the defense is moving. He did that masterfully this year. And that was, I think, the biggest growth for, watching JSN, because he now has the Tyler Lockett playbooks. He has full access to the plays. And again, it's going to be matchups and his ability to read defenses and Sam Darnold, finding and having the protection. But it should be I don't think we'll see any slack off from JSN now, moving from 2 to 3 and being primary in the Seahawks offense.
Jordan, you mentioned bringing in a veteran receiver before the draft. What about with the draft? Now that the Seahawks, they have that additional pick from the Geno trade and that extra pick from the DK trade. So you have 3 picks in the top 52, 5 in the top 100. Where do you see them addressing some needs, and what do you think they can do with all that draft capital?
Yeah, I mean, again, typical John Schneider, finding value in those assets in terms of draft positioning. Did a masterfully job of maneuvering that with, what needed to happen with the overhaul. But I see, I think, again, Sam Darnold isn't the long-term answer. He's probably there for, a 2-year deal max. And, if he does well, then it's a prove-it deal. And, but I think there'll be some changing. There'll be some repositioning for the real franchise quarterback. So whether that's in this year's draft, I'm not sure if they'll get in a position to find a quarterback this year or over the next year as next year's draft class as well. I see them investing in a quarterback, but it'll be late. I think the primary focus is going to be an offensive weapon. And you have to make that the focus after losing the kind of players both in DK and Tyler Lockett and what they do in terms of production collectively. You got to find a replacement. I think a pass rusher again, is high on the board in terms of priority. And so whether that's first or second level. So it'll either be, I think they're set at least okay in a secondary that is not the priority. There's probably a need for depth, but I think an offensive playmaker or a pass rusher would be the primary focus with those early picks.
Hey, Babs, in 1992 stands out to me. We were a really good defense on a 2-14 team, and Tom Catlin ran a 4-3. It just made sense to me, and I feel like I don't think I ever made mistakes. I mean, it just everything flowed, and it got the best out of me. It got the best out of Cortez Kennedy for sure, who was Defensive Player of the Year. How important is coaching? Because we're seeing like what O'Connell did with Sam Darnold there in Minnesota, and it just seems like that's like maybe the biggest chunk of how they're going to improve the offense is through the scheme and the coaching. And how important do you think that is? And did you notice that same thing when you were a player?
I think the game has changed a lot, and it certainly has changed since 1992, Dave. I know it's
yes, I know
hard to let go,
you didn't have to bring that up, Babs.
Well, they wear face masks now, Dave, and that probably wasn't a thing back then. So a lot has certainly changed. But I was having this conversation yesterday, just casual conversation, and even from when I played just a decade ago, like the specialty coaches now and their attention to detail to find the different nuances in the game and teach technique. That's the difference. There's skilled players across the board. The margin of separation and performance is very slim. So where do you find the competitive edge? Where do you find the advantage? Mm-hmm. And you're watching the emergence of what I think coaching staffs that have grown, and not just like, a defensive coordinator, defensive backs coach, a linebacker coach, and a defensive line coach. You got specialty pass rush. You got interior defensive lineman coaches. You got, coach specific based on, game plan and technique and position. And it really just completely shifted, how teams are getting creating their competitive edge. And so, in terms of, answering really just answering your question, I think that's where, you're seeing the difference between the really great teams and the not so great football teams is their consistency to perform over a period of time, for sure. But it's those very, very fine details that's not even visible to the normal fan that you and I can pinpoint and say, that was a competitive advantage. So we'll watch, Clint, finally, get a chance to come in here and run the offense. And, he's had success, in the past with offenses. And, I obviously know the passing, the passing tree that he comes from, and, what he did with the 49ers and what he did with the New Orleans Saints. Look, he had Brock, Purdy as a quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, when you look at Brock Purdy, it's like, oh, who is Brock Purdy? But look, I think he's shown the world who he is. So I think there's a lot to be excited about, in terms of where the Seahawks are going, the offseason moves that they've made, and the leadership that they have. Again, we've said that for a decade plus with Coach Carroll. I think we can still have that same level of confidence in Mike Macdonald.
Well, this really got washed away by the news cycle of all the offensive move the Seahawks made. But over the weekend, they did re-sign Jaron Reed. They brought back Ernest Jones, who's such a key part of the defense. Jordan, where do you think this defense is right now with those guys in place and with, now a second season for Mike Macdonald? He got those first year, not jitters, but he got the first year out of the way, and now he's got the full offseason to prepare. How do you feel the defense is right now?
I think they're just a shell of what their potential is. I don't think that I don't think that they're done with personnel shifts for sure. Obviously, but in terms of like finding the right key players for the kind of defense that Mike Macdonald wants to run, they're still identifying that. And here's what I mean. When we saw Coach Carroll build the Legion of Boom defense, you had Red Bryan and Cliff Averill and Chris Clemens, right? He had specific body types for positions. I think the same thing will start to happen under Coach Macdonald, is because you look at what he did in Baltimore. He had specific body types at the linebacker level. To me, it's the linebacker level that's the most important in this defense. For Coach Carroll, it was the safeties. The safety, Earl and Cam, that's clearly, clear identification that these guys were Pro Bowlers, and what they did really catered to, the skill level at third level for the DBs. But with Coach Macdonald, I think it's at the second level, and it's certainly up front. And you go back 2 years ago when the Seahawks went to Baltimore, they couldn't move the ball.
Yeah.
It was a fence. It was a wall. It felt like it was 14 guys out there. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think Coach Macdonald is building. He's just trying to get a hand on, body type specific for the position and what's called for within this defense. I think he's going to do it masterfully. But but where they are currently is just a shell of what's to come.
Yeah, and what did we were talking about how Schneider's not going to sit on his hands, and then the combination of that with Macdonald and how that move I thought was very impressive to me. That during the season, and like you said, Mike Macdonald really values off the ball inside linebackers. Like that's the position group that he would coach if he were only coaching one position. And Ernest Jones seemed to entirely turn that defense around. And then as far as Tyrese Knight, I thought that made him a lot better. But yeah, I thought that was really a bold move, and I felt like that's something that he should really be commended for. That he's not just going to sit around. I feel like a lot of teams would have waited until the offseason to fix that. Mm-hmm. And what did you see out of Ernest Jones that turned this defense around so drastically?
Yeah, well, I think it was night and day. In terms of Ernest Jones' ability to, be decisive and play downhill. He played like a linebacker. And Dave, I know you appreciated that from your days of just kind of loving that position. I don't know why you still think that's the most exciting position on the field.
Most important.
Okay, most important. Well, in terms of play calling, you guys do get to play from the sideline. But look, Ernest Jones, I think, will continue to he'll be the glue of what I think this defense and where this defense will grow. And that was, again, commendable to see that they were able to get something done, because I know that was a big thing, towards the end of the season, whether or not, he'd be signing back free agent. But again, And that, you see McDonald kind of locking in a few of his key players, Jaron Reed. I mean, that's a big plus, a bonus coming back. But I think Jaron Reed in year 12 still performing at a high level.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense. And so again, a lot to be excited about. But I think you hit it right on the head, Dave. If Mike wanted to coach his position specifically, it would be the linebacker. So what I know is that it being a lot of demand on the linebackers tells me a lot about Ernest Jones's IQ as a football player. And I think he should be commended for that.
Jordan, it's a question we kind of started the show with, Dave and I, discussing the Seahawks from their 2022 draft class who are entering their final year of their rookie deals. And a ton of guys out there. We won't ask you about every single one of them, but a guy like Riq Woolen, such an interesting case study. What would you pay him? Do you think the Seahawks are really going to open up the checkbook to try to keep him if he wants maybe top-of-the-line cornerback money?
Oh, that's a tough one because, gosh, you talk about Reed came in as a talent. Just a fine talent, right? And, you know that he's dealt with a little injuries and he's had a lot of success early, and then there's a little slow drop off the last 2 years. I think last year was better than his sophomore year, so that was, he's definitely trending up. To me, I think this is okay. If you want it, then prove it kind of deal, kind of year for Reed. And I think whether or not the Seahawks choose to pay him, the market is going to set itself for someone to pay him. Mm-hmm. So I don't think money is the issue, but I think in validating his command for, that specific contract is going to be how well he performs this year. Reek is a phenomenal player, has all of the gifts. He plays the ball well, top-notch speed, great cover corner. Again, when I look at it, it's something shows up that's not right in the game. And it's always the one or two head scratcher plays where it's again, without knowing the coverage, it's well, what the hell? You know what I mean? And so to your point about him being an interesting case study, I think that's it, right? It's going to be his ability to stay laser focused, locked in for 60 minutes and not give up, not make the mental errors. Because I thought, at least from, me understanding coverage just in general, there seemed to be some mental errors that just showed up. Yeah. I wouldn't say consistently, but enough to be recognized. And so this year, as you look at him, again, last year of his deal, you want the high dollar contract, and you're going to have to prove it this year. But again, if the Seahawks aren't willing to pay him, then I think he can go out and command it in the market.
Yeah, great stuff there. Jordan, we appreciate the time. And we did have our text line deliver, so I picked the 6 best nicknames they came up with. We have
all right, go for it.
We have Babineaux, K-N-O-W. We have
okay, love it.
Babineaux's all. That's a second choice there. The Babnosticator. Then we had a play on your first name, the Great Jordini.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, I know. They went off the Babineaux one there. Babsterdamus, and then Babs to the Future.
Oh, nice. Great job.
Oh, cool. Well, love my Seattle fans, and always appreciate jumping on and share some insights. And Dave, just always know that I'll never want the ownership of sitting in the seat of making these transaction decisions. So again, I'm just playing, kind of the pick of the easy game, doing it from afar. But I'll leave
GM
that
for
to
a
the
day.
experts. Yeah.
There you go.
Fired. But anyway, it's been fun, guys, and can't wait to talk more about the Hawks and see how things progress for the rest of the offseason.
Yeah, sounds
great
great
stuff, Babs. Appreciate you.